Welcome to video 36. Let's talk really briefly about Composer. Composer is a command line based dependency manager for PHP. It's the recommended method that the PayPal API and SDK suggest for downloading the most recent versions of the files and managing them. Basically, to give you a kind of overview of what it accomplishes, you can take a look at getcomposer.org and look at their Get Started page. What it does is it sort of solves a problem when you're building a complex web app. You might have multiple libraries that application needs to access, APIs, SDKs, that sort of thing, and perhaps those libraries also need access to other libraries. So there are multiple levels of dependency within your application. And Composer makes this simple because you can define a JSON file. Looks something like this. Basically, it's just a structured way of representing what libraries and dependencies you need. And then using this command line tool, it'll automatically download and automatically load those files into your application for you. So it makes things quite simple and gives an automated structure for downloading and updating those libraries. Now, I've gone ahead and decided I won't be covering this in too much detail. It's a little bit, I won't say it's complex to install, but there are different instructions for both Mac and PC. And I think I'm going to focus primarily on the shopping cart and the SDK in this case. We can download everything we need through GitHub, so I'm going to go ahead and do that method. But I would suggest you come back and look at this in the future. It does seem like command line tools are sort of the trend recently. I've used Composer when I've used the Laravel PHP library, or PHP framework, I guess is the better term. And I think you're going to be seeing a lot more command line tools, even for front-end development. It seems like that's the direction things are heading. So the more comfortable you can get with command line and command line tools, the better. So definitely check this out in the future. That said, let's get to downloading the actual files that we'll need to set up both the SDK within our project and also set up the sample files. So I'm at github.com/paypal/rest-api-sdk-php. And I'm going to go ahead and download this entire structure to my desktop. And you should see a download zip button in the bottom right hand corner of this column here. And if you don't see it for some reason, I have noticed that GitHub sometimes collapses this column. You might just see just the icon, not the text next to each of them. So if you don't see this, click the code icon here. It should expand outward and you'll get the download zip button. So download that to your desktop. And then secondly, go ahead and download this zip here. As you can see, PayPal suggests that you download this via Composer, but just for the simplicity's sake, we're going to use GitHub instead. So what I've done is I've downloaded the main SDK and the sample files to my desktop. You can see them here. So here's the samples, here's the SDK itself. And I'm going to unzip the samples to a spot on my server that can be easily accessed. I'm going to copy those files over. And then in addition, I need to copy the SDK over as well. So I'm going to unzip that as well. It generates this vendor folder, and we need to put that within the sample folder. So I'm going to drag it over. And you can see this if we go to the front end. It looks like this. This is the folder on my server. If you look within the sample folder, you'll get this page that lists both code samples that you can execute and also the source for each of those samples. And we're going to be focused primarily on this PayPal account payments sample here, and we'll be reusing that within our shopping cart application. One thing to note, perhaps this is just a quirk of my system, but you'll notice how my local host has this 8888 in the URL. That's the port number, and you may not run into this on your end, but I have noticed that when I execute some of these code samples, I have in some cases, when it loads here, run into this error message. I get an HTTP response code 400 And you'll note if you look through it, it says invalid URL, specifically for the cancel URL. And the way to fix that, if you have the same issue, is let's go within samples. We need to look, I believe it's bootstrap.php. Excuse me, no, it's actually common.php. So to go back, here's the main sample folder, or sample code. I need to be within the samples folder, and I need to look at common.php. So I'm going to open that with my text editor, and basically the issue here is in the getBaseURL function. I'm not totally sure if this is a bug. It kind of seems like it to me. But what happens on the back end is we get a URL that actually duplicates this port. So what you can do instead is I'm going to take off the port section. I'm just going to delete that entirely out of the code. Save this file, and if I run this again, it should automatically redirect us to PayPal. There we go. So just to keep that in mind, the URL does need to be tweaked potentially if you run into the same issue with a port number in your URL. So the final thing, now that we have the sample code up and running, is I want to make sure we have the SDK in place within our own shopping cart application. So to do that, let's go ahead and unzip the SDK one more time. We get the vendor folder again. Let's navigate to the shopping cart. Here within my Killer Sites folder, and within the app folder, I'm going to drag that vendor in place. So join me in the next video. I'm going to be actually starting to work with the code a bit more.